here we are in August 2020, a full 6 months after the declaration of the state of emergency in Ontario, 6 months after the declaration of the COVID pandemic. And I think it's time that we compare what we've seen 6 months later from what we were told to expect back in March. Back in March, we were told that we could expect 100,000 deaths in Ontario. And this justified the state of emergency, this dire prediction. In fact, we have had 2,800 deaths in Ontario. Over 1,800 of those deaths have been in long-term care. That's the fact as compared to the prediction, right? We can also look at the other numbers, and maybe we will in a bit. But one of the other numbers is that 37,000 people who have tested positive for COVID have also recovered. Many of them didn't even know they had COVID, or their symptoms were so mild they were confused with a cold or other minor symptoms. Those are facts. Another fact is we have a lot of people who are scared. That's a fact. I've talked to them. Indeed, I think there's people out there, many people, who are so terrified of contracting COVID that they limit how often they will go outside. They limit their interactions with other people. That's a fact. We also know that in Ontario, we've made mask mandatory in just about every community, even though we've had less than 1,000 deaths outside of long-term care, which is on par with a regular flu season. Our hospitalizations are on par with a regular flu season. Everything that we know about hospitalizations, about recovery, about fatalities with COVID are generally the same or very similar to what we experience every year in Ontario with every flu season. Those are facts. The predictions that justified the closure of our economy, that justified the closure of our healthcare system, the predictions that shut down our social interactions, none of those predictions have actually become true. The facts are very different from the predictions. But here's another fact. The fact is that there are still many people who are fearful. Maybe they haven't seen the facts on mortality. Maybe they haven't seen the facts on recovery. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity to compare this year with previous years. And they're hearing mostly the continued and the relentless headlines about COVID, and not having the opportunity to peel back the layers of headlines and get into the data, the evidence, and the reality. Many people have asked me why are we continuing with this excessive restrictions and lockdowns on our education system, our healthcare, our economy, our social interactions. And in short, it is, or a lot, can be attributed to public opinion. I can tell you this, there's very, very few elected politicians who are speaking out, or even, I would say, even inquiring as to, is our response to COVID proportionate? Is it reasonable? Is it responsible? They're fearful of speaking out because of peer pressure. They're fearful of speaking out because of perceptions of public backlash and opposition. And that is true. There is no question in my mind that there are many elected people who are following public opinion instead of discharging their duties as leaders in their communities, of standing up, speaking out, and ensuring our policies are proportionate and reasonable. I know there's many people who view COVID in a similar fashion to me, that its effects and its consequences are not dissimilar to what we see each and every year in this country and in our province. And they're wondering, how did we get here? And more importantly, how do we get out of this? And it comes down to very simple. Politicians follow public opinion. If you're at home and you're wondering what you can do to influence our policies, what you can do to end these excessive restrictions, what you can do to end these mandatory masks, well, you can take part in public opinion. You can take part in democracy. How many of people watching this have picked up the phone and called the Premier's office, have called the Minister of Health? How many have written a letter to the Premier, to the Minister of Health? How many have written a letter to your own member of provincial parliament? How many have written a letter to their town council? That's what, and that's how democracy works. It's a two-way street. People need to be engaged. People need to be involved. And if you believe the facts rather than the predictions, if you recognize that the policies 6 months later are not proportionate to the risk, if you're concerned when this state of emergency is going to be over, or if it will be over, you can make that change. Pick up the phone the Premier. Pick up the phone the Minister of Health. Write a letter to your local Member of Parliament. These are all things that we must do if we want to be influential, if we want to take part in our democracy. It's no good just sitting down on the computer and making a comment on Facebook or on Instagram. It's not bad, but it's not going to have the effect that you want. You need to be engaged. You need to be involved. You need to tell elected members what it is that you expect. Because I know